Greetings once again, my friends, and welcome back to Drak Reviews, where it's finally time for us to take on the best and the worst that 2017 had to offer. But first, let's just go over the year as a whole. I would actually like to say that 2017 overall was a good year, but like with any year, it had its ups and its downs. It had its great moments, but it also had its disappointments, and the gaming industry is no different in this regard. And for us to be able to truly appreciate the best that 2017 had to offer, we must first go through the worsts, as I go through my top 10 most disappointing games of 2017. Alright, so before we get started, there are a few rules that I need to unload before we get into the top 10. So here we go. Rule number 1, this is my list. I'm sure you have your own list, I'm sure you have your own opinions, and you're more than welcome to them. But this is my list, this is my opinions. And as much as I welcome your feedback on the opinion of my list, I ask that you do so in a civil manner. If you can't do that, then here's the way that I literally look at it. Just as much as you have the right to be able to write a comment about how stupid and dumb I am, I also have the right to look at your comment, deem you an asshole, delete the comment, and move on with my life. So if you have a complaint, if you have an opinion, please approach this civilly. I would love to have that discussion with you. All right, rule number 2. If it has been remastered in some way, shape, or form this year, it is removed from consideration. While that might seem unfair, the way I see it is simply this. They already had their time to shine in the years that they came out, and unfortunately, the best thing that I could say about them is that they got a facelift and they got improved audio and all of that fun stuff. So it doesn't seem really all that fair to judge stuff that has come out from previous years and gotten a facelift compared to the games that came out this year. Now, with all that being said, let's get into it. Number 10. Star Wars Battlefront 2.
But Drak, you can't say you're disappointed in this game. It was the most horrible thing that ever came out in 2017. Oh my gosh.
I can easily say that I'm not disappointed, and the reason I can is because I saw the crap coming. No, I'm not saying that I'm psychic, people, but the bottom line is I knew that as soon as this game got announced, there was going to be something that EA would do to literally trip and fall on their face. And lo and behold, when the beta and the alpha were out, we found out about the damn microtransactions. So to say that I'm absolutely hateful of this game or anything like that would be a deception. I really just don't care for this game. I saw every misstep that EA was going to do coming a mile away, and that's why this is as low as it is on the list. So, I mean, if you're a Star Wars fan, good on you. But for me, this is my number 10. Number 9. Splatoon 2. Okay, this might be a little bit of a shock, but people might remember that I actually didn't do a review on this list when I promised one. And there's a simple reason for it. I played through a couple of single-player modes and multiplayer modes, and really my thoughts on the game were that I had none. I actually tried to compose a review for this I don't know how many times, and I kept coming up blank. It's not to say that it's a bad game, it's just not really an overwhelming or a major change to what we've already gotten in Splatoon. In fact, I made the joke with friends over the year that if this had been called Splatoon Definitive Edition and moved over as a remaster for the first game, I wouldn't have known the difference, and I don't know if I would have cared. I mean, sure, there's more single player, there's more multiplayer to be able to mess around with, but I couldn't escape the concept that this feels like Splatoon 1. And it was disappointing in that regard. I really wish that this had turned things up a notch and really earned the multiplayer and esports cred that Nintendo wanted to get with this via the Switch. Number 8. Uncharted: The Lost Legacy. So to some, this might actually seem as a really weird pick, and while I do stand by the score, and I do stand by what I've actually said in my review for Uncharted: The Lost Legacy, from a personal perspective, there was always something about this that bothered me and therefore disappointed me, at least in one little aspect of this game, earning its place in the list. And that is that, well, one of the reasons I love the first two Uncharted games, and don't get me wrong, I like all of them, but in particular the first two, is that we have pretty much an Indiana Jones-esque plot, where eventually, even though a very science-minded man comes into contact with elements that science can't explain. In essence, why the Ark of the Covenant should have remained where it was. And in Uncharted's case, it's usually why a tomb was never raided or why a door was locked for so long. And this is actually one of those games in the series that I wish that trope would return. The last few games, it hasn't been there, and frankly, given the prickish nature of Asav as a character, we really needed to have that moment where he then realizes why this whole place was locked up to begin with, why the Tusk of Ganesh was not attainable, and gets his comeuppance in the end. I mean, seriously, he's like the most prickish villain in the entire Uncharted series. I like the Uncharted 1 and 2 villains, but this guy's a downright prick and didn't really deserve... I mean, a lot of people will say the cool part was that Nadine and Chloe took him out, but this is one of those guys that really needed to have, like, giant monstrous army, plowing him down. And unfortunately, that never happened, and that's why, in essence, I have this tiny gripe with such a good game. Number 7. YookaLaylee. Wow, another game with a fairly high score. It's almost like there's a pattern or something. In YookaLaylee's case, unfortunately, since it came so early in the year and I was able to try so many platformers this year, one of the things that actually holds YookaLaylee back is the gripe that lands it on this list. I'm not saying that YookaLaylee is a bad game. I stand by my score, but the bottom line is that when you look at all of the other platformers that came out, this one's pretty bland. And the reason that it's bland is, while I do appreciate Platonic and what they tried to do, this is Banjo 3E, essentially. It's Banjo 1, Banjo 2, but with new characters, new mascots, new villains, everything like that. It is the exact Banjo formula, and it doesn't really add on to it. I know that there are unique features in this game, but they essentially kind of existed in previous other games, and so these are minor steps forward in a formula that's pretty much just followed to the letter in this game. Unlike some of the other platformers, which tried to push beyond the formula, that tried to do something to make themselves unique. This game falters in that regard. It has a problem finding its own identity, aside from being a knockoff of a certain Bird and Bear. Number 6, Prey. And now we start getting into the disappointing games overall, where I've had problems with certain aspects of games or the predictability of them basically destroying themselves. This one I actually looked forward to. This one I actually anticipated. This one looked good. And especially considering the fact that, as most of you have given me the criticism, I'm not the biggest Bethesda fan, and it almost seems like I don't give them too many chances, I did actually look at this game, and even at the try, when I had the game in my hands, I was kind of excited being able to play it. It plays like BioShock. I like BioShock. I've liked all of the stuff that I've seen up until this point, and then I got deeper. And that's where I started to have the major problem. While BioShock is entertaining, this one is not so much. It has the horror elements, but they're predictable. And frankly, the meta-narrative that's going on just isn't as engaging as what BioShock was. I'm not really invested in my character, and I'm not invested into what actually happened on this station. That's the sad reality here, and that's not where this game should go. So in a lot of cases, what became really big amounts of excitement just turned to nothingness by the time I was done and ready to record the review. And that's ultimately the most disappointing about this, is that the entire game was hyped up to me and it fell short. Number 5, For Honor. Yeah, it seems appropriate that this is right in the middle of the list, because now we're starting to get into the raw disappointment. Prey was disappointing, but this one was also just as much a stab in the side. I actually was looking forward to this game, and I'm not the biggest fan of multiplayer. I liked at least what I saw in the trailers and the E3 conferences for Honor. I thought this game actually had a lot of potential. And then I played the story. Not only does it have the story mode of a Call of Duty game, roughly about 4 hours, I believe overall it took for me to beat this. Not only that, We also had one of the most bland villains that I don't even think this story mode needed in retrospect. Oh look, it's a tyrant, and it just so happens to be a woman that is looking to set things up as the scientific food chain. Only the strong shall survive. Where have I seen this plot before? I would have actually liked to have seen a more intricate plot come in here, where we actually did have to worry about resources. Instead, most of the stuff was infighting. Most of the events that you got into, if you were the knights, you got brought into this lady's army, and then you basically took everybody over. Then they moved to the Vikings, and the Vikings' resources were starting to get pillaged by them. But even then, they were fighting amongst each other. And the samurai, it was no different. You actually had factions that were siding with Tyrant Woman. Holy crap, there's just so much wrong here. And the sad reality is there was so much potential for it to get better. I have had numerous times where I've wanted to get back into For Honor just to see the new models, the new possible races, new soldiers that you can play as, but every time I get to that last step to turn it on, I am reminded of how frustrating the story mode was, how frustrating the gameplay can potentially be, especially if you have a little bit of rust on it, and overall just nudge my head and move on with my life. Number 4. Bubsy, the Woolies Strike Back. Seriously, why does this game exist now? Why was this series rebooted? If they'd actually given a crap, which I'm still debating whether or not Accolade actually cared. I think the indie studio did, but I think Accolade also played a part in why this is as mediocre as it possibly can be. But if you're only going to aim for mediocre, then why does this game exist? Why was it made? Why was money put into it? Why on earth do I have it on my PS4? Why do you have it on your PS4? It doesn't make sense that this exists unless you are going to give a real honest-to-God effort. And I have to say, it just doesn't feel like there was one given. Sure, it plays like a Bubsy game. I can't necessarily deny that aspect, but it's incredibly short. It doesn't necessarily add on to the formula. It, in fact, adds more annoyance than it does anything else. It doesn't make up for past games. It mainly tries to be a Bubsy game in modern day. That's really all it does. It's essentially YookaLaylee. It's trying to follow the Bubsy formula and not really moving past it. So again, I have to ask the question, and that's my main disappointment here. Why does this game exist? Why is it rebooted if you weren't going to take advantage of the opportunity? Needless to say, I stand with this one's score, and if there's going to be another Bubsy game, which I doubt, maybe they'll actually learn from this one, which they won't. Number 3. Double Dragon 4. What else can I say with this one to encapsulate my frustration other than I almost beat it on Drak tries? This game, Double Dragon games are supposed to be at least somewhat long because of difficulty. I know that I was playing on a fairly easy level of difficulty, but I have played it on normal. I was actually able to cruise through it there too. What the heck? This game is just not that long. And that's a disappointment to me, where you can have games like Double Dragon Neon, and yeah, granted, that's not very long either, but at least it feels longer than this one. I actually look forward to this. It was in the Double Dragon 2 engine, which is frankly my favorite Double Dragon engine for a game, and I trounced it. I almost beat it on Drak tries. And yeah, that's frustrating to me, guys. I want to have games with a level of depth, especially when I expect them, probably because from childhood, but I expect depth from Double Frickin' Dragon. The other thing that I'll actually point out that I didn't necessarily say in the Drak tries is it didn't necessarily even feel like a Double Dragon game. It felt like a weird Mad Max ripoff. I'm not saying that isn't necessarily what Double Dragon goes for. I mean, I've seen the movie, for crying out loud, and it does that too. But I looked at that and went, well, one of the reasons that I like Double Dragon is kind of the same reason why I like Streets of Rage and Final Fight. It's just you on the streets, and whether you're rescuing your girlfriend or you're saving the streets from drugs or whatever, that's all I expect from it. This went like a weird Mad Max route, and, well, frankly, I'm not the biggest Mad Max fan. I know that that's sacrilege, but I'm stating the obvious. So this one actually did teeter into the frustration of it, in the frustration level, simply because of how fast I cruised through it. The price was not worth it. I stand by my score, and here's hoping that the next Double Dragon game, if there is one, actually learns from this and probably tries to recreate Neon. Number 2, Mass Effect Andromeda. The only way I know how to describe my frustration for this game, and thus my disappointment, is potential. This game had so much potential to live up to. The Mass Effect series is considered one of the best games, if at least in the last decade of all, at best in that, or at most it would be of all time. The hype was there for Andromeda. BioWare had earned its cred with its fan base. And here came the Empire themselves to come in and screw it all up. I would technically be one of the people that would fault them for Mass Effect 3 before Andromeda, because a lot of the things that I hear people have problems with, because as of this top 10, I'm still not finished with it. Mainly because after playing this game, I wasn't really motivated to finish it. A lot of the frustrations from Mass Effect 3 came from EA sticking its nose where it didn't belong. And if that only happened in like a minor 10% deal in Mass Effect 3, it was all over Andromeda. Holy crap. This game played almost as if you could actually do a Call of Duty-esque entry every year. I almost wonder if EA was looking to do a Mass Effect entry every year, and that would have sucked. You had nothing but potential. You had a whole new galaxy to explore, new alien races, new threats, new everything to be able to go. This was Star Trek to a lot of people. This was going off and exploring the unknown, seeking out new civilizations, and boldly going where no one had gone before. And what did you do with it? Oh, bland ice planet. Oh, bland jungle planet. It was literally like Mass Effect 1. Oh, and even better, you brought back the one element of Mass Effect 1 that I hate above all else with the Mako. And seriously, you discover 2 races. Our galaxy had numerous races. So much so that after Mass Effect 1, they still added races in 2 and even added an additional one in 3. What the heck? 1 race, or 2 races, because you have a villain race and you have a good race. 2 races in an entire galaxy. Really? That is the dumbest thing I've ever seen. And on top of that, the part that makes the knife just twist even more in the side is you had everything behind this. You had the funding. You had BioWare working their butts off to make this awesome. Yes, they were working on Anthem in the meantime, but they were working on this because they wanted this to be just as good as any other Mass Effect. But then came the second head on their shoulder that was EA going, no, you gotta do this because this is what we do. Seriously, EA. You haven't learned your lesson for many, many years now, and I really wish you'd learn it. Get out of the developer's way. If you don't like that you're spending all of this money on this product, then maybe you ought to reduce the budget and give people incentive to give this thing a shot. Instead, you want to put microtransactions in every stinking product that comes out from you because that's the only way you can make up for these huge Hollywood-esque budgets. No wonder you end up in debt with these games, because then gamers are so pissed at you, they won't buy into the microtransactions. I hate to say this, EA. I can't blame BioWare on this one. This is all you. This kerfuffle, this whole project was on you as far as I am concerned. Now, people might remember that this was my worst game on the podcast. And remember, I was still working on reviews for this top 10, and this was the worst thing ever. This is the biggest blunder in 2017 to date, until number 1. Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite. You know, I can at least understand Star Wars. I can justify that. I can understand Mass Effect Andromeda. This one, I can't. This formula, how on earth do you screw this up? And it's Capcom of all people. I'm not necessarily saying they've had good years in the past 5 or so years, but they've at least made some good decisions here and there. And at least with this series, they weren't making bad ones. Screw whatever you say about Marvel vs. Capcom 3 or Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3. Compared to this atrocity, I'd rather play that. At least it's balanced enough that anybody can get into, like any other Marvel vs. Capcom game. No, this game comes in with a learning curve for even the average or most casual player. And not only that, they decided to finally implement a story to a franchise, or at least a franchise for Capcom, that didn't need one. We didn't need to justify why this worked. It just did. All you needed to do to make this a worthwhile project is keep on adding Marvel characters, keep on adding Capcom characters. Occasionally, if there are movies coming out, yeah, go for it. Have fun with it. And this is what we got. You decided to add story to it. You actually took out, I didn't even cover this in the review. You took out beloved characters of this franchise. You didn't even add them in as DLC. What the crap, Capcom? You had Wolverine. You didn't have the rights to Wolverine because Fox has the movie rights to Wolverine. That's never stopped you before. Just go ahead and put him in there. And if you can't put Wolverine in there, you can at least put in properties that have been in Marvel vs. Capcom games and would work here. I mean, ever since then, we've actually had the Fox acquisition, so there's no excuse now. You can have Wolverine, you can have Cyclops, you can have Psylocke in here, you can have pretty much all of the X-Men, you can bring in freaking Deadpool, it's entirely fine, but no, this game is pretty much done, and frankly, like I said in the review, doesn't deserve a place at emo. I'm glad that Fighters beat it out, and I cannot emphasize this enough. The designs of these characters is bad. Even coming back to this and revisiting it for this top 10, there were models that I didn't have problems with that I now do. It's just like looking at this, eventually it becomes puke on the screen and you don't want to deal with it. You want to turn it off as fast as possible. And I'm not even kidding. Who on earth decided to let Rob Liefeld back into the Capcom office? I can understand if you want to take certain comic designs from modern day comics, but why on earth would you go for the Liefeldian-esque model for the models in this damn game? They even make the Capcom models look bad. Here's an idea. Don't do Liefeld. Just stay away from him.
Dude! Rob Liefeld is awesome!
KO! Whew! I feel a lot better. It was good to get that off my chest. Well, that's going to be the top 10 disappointing games of 2017, and when I come back, we'll take on the best games of 2017. Till next time, and until then, I need some waffles. Ugh.